Voters across the EU are choosing members of the bloc's next parliament. Poverty, the cost of living, healthcare and unemployment are among their main concerns. 373 million people across the EU are eligible to choose 720 members of parliament for the European Union who will serve 5-year terms. Let's take a closer look at what the European Parliament does. Its main job is to adopt, amend or reject laws proposed by the EU Commission. While it oversees laws along with the European Commission and the Council of the EU, it cannot initiate legislation. The Parliament approves the EU budget, new executives of the European Commission and elects its president. Members of the EU Parliament are organised into 7 groups according to their political ties. They meet in Strasbourg in France about once a month. The rest of the time they work in Brussels on committees overseeing policy areas such as environment, trade and foreign affairs. On Sunday, voters in 21 EU countries, including France and Germany, are casting their ballots. In a moment, we'll be going to Natacha Butler, who's standing by in Paris. But first, let's head to Berlin, the German capital, where Step Vaessen is for us. So, Step, now, how busy is voting at that polling station where you are in Germany?
Well, pretty busy. We haven't heard a final figure about the turnout yet, but it is predicted that turnout this year for the European elections could be slightly higher than in 2019. And we have to remember Germany has been allocated the largest number of seats in the European Parliament. It gets 96 seats of the 720. So a lot of eyes here on Germany and what the polls today will show. And one of the issues to look out for is how the Alternative for Germany, the far-right party, will be doing. It's really a test also for the current government. That's how these European elections are also seen, because a lot of people vote according to their national interests. And what we are seeing is that the current government is getting quite a bad mark. The Social Democrat Party of Olaf Scholz and his coalition party, the Greens, are predicted to lose quite significantly, and the Alternative for Germany party could come in second. So this is really a prediction also which we see across the European Union, that the far-right parties are doing a lot better than 5 years ago, because people are more concerned about security. They're much more Eurosceptic at the moment, much more nationalism is playing a role. So this is also what we are seeing. And in the next half an hour or so, we will hear what the predictions are, because then the polls will close here in Germany and they will have a first exit poll.
Thank you very much, Step, for that. Step Vaessen live for us there in Berlin. Let's head over to Paris now. Natacha Butler is there for us. The far-right party is expected to also make gains in France, Natacha.
Yes, the far-right party of Marine Le Pen, the National Rally Party, is expected to make big gains in this election. That's certainly the way it's been looking over the past few weeks. Now, Le Pen's campaign has been led by 28-year-old Jordan Bardella. He's Le Pen's protégé, something of a rising political far-right star here in France. He's already an MEP, and what he's managed to do is really widen the appeal of Le Pen's party. He's still anti-Islam, he's still anti-immigration. However, what he's done is appeal to a much younger, wider electorate. We were at a rally, Le Pen rally, quite recently, and it was really interesting to see just how many young people there were there. Now, on the other side, you've got President Macron's party certainly lagging behind in the polls in recent weeks. President Macron has chosen Valérie Ayer to lead his campaign, somebody that very few people in France are familiar with. It seems as if there's been very little momentum for that party. And as so often in elections in France, it seems in recent times that they become something of a referendum on Macron. So either people like Macron or they're fed up of his policies and they'll vote against him. That is what his party is certainly concerned about in this election, because what some are saying is if Marine Le Pen does well in these EU elections, it could be a stepping stone for her to the presidential election in 2027.
And what would this mean then for France and Macron himself?
Well, that's the thing. If Marine Le Pen's party was to do well in these EU elections, what many observers and political watchers are saying is that we could see a situation in 2 years' time in which the French President Emmanuel Macron cannot run because he will have already served 2 terms. And you could see Marine Le Pen riding on the momentum of these EU elections, possibly winning the 2027 presidential race. She's certainly presenting herself like that already. As I said, we were at a rally where she was presenting herself in a presidential manner. She was talking about how Jordan Bardella, who is leading this EU campaign for her, would be her prime minister. And that is the sort of image they're trying to project. There's no doubt the far right here in France in recent years has tried to appear more mainstream, has tried to appeal to more voters here in France. Nevertheless, there are the critics of the party who say they remain as extreme and on the margins of mainstream politics as ever.
Thank you very much for that, Natacha Butler, live for us there in Paris. Well, let's discuss all this further now with Peter Klepper, who's the editor-in-chief at the Brussels Report, a Belgian news website, and is joining us from the Belgian capital. Peter, good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. This is being described as the most consequential EU election in decades, and we're already seeing the first exit polls from Austria, where the far-right party leads, according to these exit polls. And it's expected, as we've heard from our correspondents, that the EU Parliament will shift to the right. What could this mean then for EU policies? How would it affect Europe?
The consequences could be quite big. First of all, there will be the election of the new Commission president. Apparently, the European Parliament will vote on this on the 18th of July. Now, you have to keep in mind that already 5 years ago, Ms. von der Leyen, the Commission president, was dependent to get elected on the votes of the party of Viktor Orban from Hungary and of the Polish governing party PiS then. Now, it's likely that this year she will also have to rely, if, of course, she makes it, on the votes of the populist right, like, for example, the party of Italian Prime Minister Meloni. Now, it would be wrong to consider this like a permanent coalition. The way it works in the European Parliament is consecutive coalitions on the different topics. But of course, the fact that you have so much more right-wing MEPs and populist right-wing MEPs will mean that they will be involved a lot more than previously.
Yeah, but interesting point you raised there. Can these populist parties be organized enough to work together, you think? Because they have differing and varying views on a number of issues, whether it's in Italy, Germany, or France even. Can they work together?
Look, they are split on many topics, for example, Russia, but so are also the mainstream parties. For example, the group of the party of the French president, Macron. That group is quite badly split on many topics. And, the European Parliament is a forum where you have constant negotiations. So you have to basically look at the fact that on average, you will have more, right-wing MEPs involved. And of course, the reason is that, many voters are annoyed by the relatively extreme green policies that have been implemented over the last 5 years. De facto ban on the combustion engine, all kinds of new restrictions, and new requirements for people to invest in the isolation of their homes that are not profitable for them. So, I mean, this is basically the backlash as a result of rather extreme policies.
Yeah, a backlash, you say. Do you think the mainstream political forces will now be forced to move to the right on issues such as climate change, for example, or migration, if these exit polls that we're seeing in countries like Austria or the opinion polls are confirmed?
Well, they already have. When you're talking about green policies, the European People's Party, which is the sort of centrist, center-right group, they have started to vote against some of this legislation. And, surprisingly, before they almost uncritically went along with it. That was the real surprising thing. Also, when you're talking about migration, at the moment, I think 19 European leaders already out of the 27 are supportive of something like the UK's Rwanda approach. Not exactly the same, but some kind of an approach whereby asylum would be outsourced outside of the EU in order to try to break the human smuggling model. So people would no longer pay €10,000 to make it to EU territory, because there would be no point. They would only be allowed access to EU territory after they would have received an asylum decision.
Right, but whether this will be effective remains to be seen, of course. Now, beyond Brussels and Strasbourg and European capitals, what impact do you see these elections having, beyond European borders? We've talked about migration and climate change, for example, but what about relations with the US?
I don't think these elections will have a major effect on that. Perhaps the relations with China. At the moment, there's a big debate on whether there should be extra tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. I could imagine if some protectionist forces move forward, which looks likely, that this would also have an effect on that.
And what about Middle East policy?
Gaza plays a very big role in European politics, but of course the question is, if you have a certain opinion on this, who do you vote for, and will it ultimately have an effect? I'm skeptical that on the Middle East there will be a major effect.
Thank you for talking to us. Peter Klepper, Editor-in-Chief at the Brussels Report, joining us there from the Belgian capital. Thank you very much.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.